Aloha, welcome to Fast, Healthy, and Ono Cooking. Tonight we'll be learning about Greek chicken, which is just right for these summer days. And next Thursday, we're going to start a whole new series on Japanese cooking, starting with sushi hand roll. So be sure to tune in for that. My name is Jim Monahan. I'm an AARP Hawaii volunteer, and I'll be your host tonight. On behalf of our sponsors, Kaunoa Senior Services on Maui, Walla Leaf Cafe at Windward Community College, and AARP Hawaii, welcome. Let me click to the next slide. For those of you who are new or maybe unfamiliar with AARP in Hawaii, we're a membership organization for people 50 and older, but what we do for everyone. We hope that with this series, you can learn some techniques that you can use to build or maintain your healthy lifestyle. Okay, let's do a quick bit of housekeeping. This is a picture of what you should be seeing at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And if you're on a PC, that is if you're on a PC, and possibly on the top of the screen if you're using an iPad. Everybody is currently on mute, and we'll keep it that way. If you want to submit a question or a comment, please click the button that says Q&A, that's Q&A, and type in your questions. I will be monitoring questions and making sure they get asked. If you're watching on Facebook Live, you may type your questions in the comments area there. We won't be using the raised hand command because questions are submitted in the Q&A. And the chat command is not for questions and answers. It's not needed unless you want to communicate a technical issue. Alice Swift, Dave DeWitt, and Jackie Boland are standing by with the technical help if you need anything there. Excuse me. So we recommend that you select speaker side-by-side view rather than gallery view for this presentation. Do this by clicking on the upper right part of your screen. And once you're in that view, you can change the size of the slides of the speaker simply by clicking and dragging on the middle bar. And finally, we've added closed captioning to this presentation for those who have difficulty hearing. You can turn this off if you want at your end by clicking on the CC Live transcript button at the lower right side of your screen and click Hide Subtitle. And please be looking, we'll announce the winner of our door prize. And if you get into the chat area and let Dave know your address, he'll make sure you get your great prize. So now it is my pleasure to introduce our Chef Daniel Swift, who'll be leading us through this cooking series. Chef Dan, I am going to turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Jim. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Nice new microphone, Jim. Your voice sounds like you're ready for radio.
Okay. Thank you.
And I have to say it on the front end, as opposed to the back end. It's Jim's last day with us. He'll be moving, and I can't thank you enough for all of the time you spent and helping us out and making me look good. So thank you so much, and best of luck moving forward. Okay. So tonight we're focusing on, well, Greek chicken is what we had written it up for. And we wanted to throw in a couple sides. So Jackie added the couscous, which is one of my favorites. I mean, I don't think it gets any easier, and you'll see that as we make it tonight. And then I added one that's not on the recipe. If you got the recipe downloaded, it's for a Greek salad, extremely popular. We'll go through the ingredients. It's you almost don't even really need a recipe for that one. It's just so simple, and it's delicious. I love it. So we'll go through that, and starting with the chicken and getting the marinade and all of those things together. But before we do that, let's take a quick look at some oregano. It's really one of the key herbs that you would use in a lot of Greek cooking, a lot of Mediterranean cooking, actually, along with marjoram and some other earthy, they like the earthy type of herb. So I've got a Mexican oregano. Jackie Malley kindly dropped this off, or both of these on this side. And that's a little bit larger leaf. the flavors and the aroma is very similar. But this one, the Mexican oregano is more well, it's in the family of verbena. And I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, but it's kind of a pungent and strong herb. Lemon verbena is probably the most popular one in that family that's used in cooking. It's used also in pastries a lot. And then the Greek oregano is part of the mint family. So part of me wants to say that it's a little bit more mild, but it sort of depends. In tasting these tonight, this seemed to be actually a little bit stronger in flavor. So the aromas are very similar. The tastes are similar, but they tend to vary in strength. So if you're using fresh herbs or growing these, and these do really well, at least at Kaneohe side, just taste them and then add the amount that's comfortable for your palate. You don't have to overdo it. You can always add a little bit more. Remember that it's harder to take it away once you've got it in a particular dish. So these can be a little bit overpowering if you add too much. So be a little bit careful with that. And then I'm going to start with the marinade for the chicken, which is really, really simple. I'll just move these over to the side. And you should have gotten your recipe. Hopefully, if you did, you may be cooking along or saving it for later, but it's really, really easy in terms of the ingredients. We've got chicken, and I have chicken breast on there, or I put that you could use chicken thigh. In this case, I have thighs. That's what we happen to be stocking today. I was going to grab some breasts at the store. Obviously, it's leaner when you're choosing the chicken breast. You've got a lot more intermuscular fat in the chicken thigh. And then you also have a little bit of excess fat on the outside. The outside fat easily can be trimmed off. I'm going to leave it on tonight so I don't get my hands dirty. But if you're looking for the leanest possible cut, you want to move towards the chicken breast. So that's the route to go. And if they're really big and the thick ones that you're getting today, you can cut them kind of on a bias and maybe pound them a little bit so they're a little bit thinner and it'll absorb the marinade. So that's the one that we're working with today. And then we've got the ingredients, which are really, really simple. Some olive oil, chopped garlic. I have some minced oregano in here. I'm using the Greek oregano. I've got some Greek yogurt, the low-fat Greek yogurt. This is about a half of a lemon because it was so big. I didn't want to use the whole one, of which I'll use the zest and the juice. And then that creates basically the marinade that we use for the chicken. So we've talked about marinades before, and this is kind of a twist on it because we're using something unique like the yogurt. So everything basically just goes into the bowl. The garlic, the yogurt, the oregano. And if you wanted to add in some parsley or something like that, that's kind of on the neutral side, it won't take away from the oregano, you could feel free to do that as well. Chives, if you have them in the garden. And the last little bit of olive oil. This is actually a Spanish olive oil. We don't have, or I haven't seen in the stores, a lot of Greek olive oils, but they make some incredible olive oil. It's just really hard to find here in Hawaii. If you travel or used to travel or plan to travel as moving forward past the pandemic and you make it to that part of the world, check out some of the Greek olive oils. Get a bottle and bring it back. It's really delicious and it's kind of hard to find, like I said, certainly on the mainland. So I'm just using this microplane zester. I think I've showed you guys this before. These are the ones that are super fine, almost like, a surgical tool where you can run your finger on it. It's not sharp at all. But when you use a lemon or citrus, it just takes the finest little bit off the edge. So I'm going to do that. Just work my way around the lemon, making sure not to hit my knuckles, just to get as much of the yellow. We don't want the white part, the pith. That adds bitterness, which is why this is such a great grater or zester. The old box graters used to dig a little deep and then you'd end up with some of that white pith and it's very bitter. So you want to try to avoid that as much as possible. And then once we get all the yellow outside off where those essential oils are, smells beautiful. Your hands will smell great. A lot of it collects on the back. You can probably see it there. We want to make sure you've got a tap and it'll remove all of the excess zest. So we got a lot of zest in there, a lot of those herbs. It looks beautiful. and then I just need the juice. So I tend to use a strainer. You could also use your hand to catch the seeds that might fall out, but if you use a strainer, you're guaranteed to catch them all. And this particular lemon has a lot of seeds. And you can see them there. There's about 10 seeds in there. And you don't want to run into one of those while you're biting into your chicken or something like that. And I just need to mix this up. And if there's any questions, Jim, feel free to fire away.
There's no questions, Dan, but I have a question for you. This is Jackie.
Yeah.
There's no salt in your marinade. Is that to make it healthier, or do you add it later?
I'll usually season everything at the table for sure. But we've got a lot of flavors going on with that acidity, and we've got the tartness of the yogurt, the herbs. So it's not necessary, but you could easily add it if you wanted to. It is healthier if you're watching your sodium, but I just didn't think it's necessary at this stage. If I need it at the end, I could add a little bit. But you could certainly do that. Good question. Then that's mixed up all night. If you're making this at home, I've got quite a bit of chicken here, but you could create this marinade, put it in a little Tupperware, and use it over the useful life of the actual yogurt. So if the yogurt's good for a couple weeks, mixing up your marinade, using half of it on the first day and then the other half a week later would be no problem as well. So trying to think efficiently can be helpful. And then I'm just going to add these chicken thighs. Some of these are really big. If you look at the size of these chicken thighs, those are just massive. So you can obviously cut those down as well. Some of these are actually cut in half, but there's still a lot going on there. And then we coat this really nice. And I know this is one of Jackie's favorite dishes, and the kids love it. I was hoping, I got a bunch here. I was planning on feeding your kids tonight, Jackie. I don't know what. They missed their flight, so they won't be here.
They'll be back tomorrow.
You can get it cold, microwave it for them tomorrow.
I'm not sure, Jim, if you're on the line, but there is one question on here from, well, I can't tell who it's from, but the question is, how do you keep the chicken breast moist when you cook it?
That's an awesome question. Chicken, I will tell you that to me, chicken breast and keeping it moist is probably the hardest thing to do. The best thing that you can do on the front end is always to brine it. So if you're removing the skin to get the fat out of the way, you can soak it in just a light saltwater brine. A lot of people might even put in herbs or garlic or different flavored things like that, but you definitely need a sodium-based brine. And if you do that, you don't need salt when you're cooking as well. But what it does is it absorbs that liquid into the cell structure, and it increases the weight, increases the juiciness. And then the next thing you have to do is just to make sure that you're not overcooking it, because the window for perfectly cooked to overcooked chicken breast is about 30 seconds. It's just super easy to go beyond what you need with chicken breast. So a lot of times, I've mentioned it before with thighs, it's really all I train students on. I don't even give them chicken breast. You have to earn your way up to chicken breast. So you're better off stopping a little short and then letting the carryover temperatures finish it off. But once it becomes dry, it's just really impossible to get it back to moist.
Chef Dan, this is part of the chicken discussion. Charlene is asking, is chicken tenders part of the breast, and can that be used?
Yeah, absolutely. Chicken tenders, and you see them sold now. Charlene, great question. It is, if you buy the whole breast, you'll see it on the side. There's 2 of them per chicken, each attached to a breast, and you can remove those and use them for this type of recipe or any type of recipe. It's a lean cut. It does have a piece of sinew that runs through it. So if you look at them, you'll see a little white, looks like a string sticking out of the end and going into the little tender. And what we try to do is always remove that. So we'll tend to lay it flat on the board, use your fingernail or the back of a knife to hold it down, and then just slide the tender off of it, because that will not break down. It comes a little tough. Great question.
And then
So for
Linda
now-
asked,
Yeah, Jim, I'm just gonna throw this in the oven really quick, so hopefully it'll
Okay.
get done in time. Go ahead.
Linda's asking, I noticed that you leave the fat on the chicken thighs. If I remove the fat, will it dry out the chicken?
No, very good question as well. The fat that I had on there was the exterior fat, so that was additional. You can trim the outside fat off, no problem, but where you have the advantage or disadvantage, depending on how you're looking at it with chicken thigh, is you have that intermuscular fat. So the meat itself has a little bit more fat running through it. It's a muscle that's worked more, and it develops a little bit more fat. It can be a little firmer, but it maintains its moisture through that intermuscular fat. Great question. And then I'm going to do the couscous. And I went to just down to Times today and picked it up. They had like 5 or 6 different flavors of couscous. You can buy just a straight up plain couscous. And what it is, it's basically like a cooked pasta, right? So it's a durum wheat semolina that's already cooked and ground up into these little pearls of sorts. And it's just an awesome, awesome product. And I'll walk you through the process. So you're really starting with some water or stock. In this case, I used some of the low sodium chicken stock that we've used in the past for some of the other classes. I had a couple packs left. You can get that at the supermarket as well. So it's just or actually sodium free chicken base. So you don't have to get the bouillon cubes that are very, very high in sodium. Actually, it's sometimes the first ingredient. You can get the low sodium one or the no sodium one. And then this particular one that I picked up, the couscous mix, this is like a flavored one. It had a roasted garlic and olive oil. I said, oh, I'll try that one. So it comes with a little bit of a flavor packet of herb or spices. I'm going to add that in as well. So that should make the broth really nice and flavorful. And I had a little bit of fresh parsley in the kitchen. It's pretty neutral in flavor. We see it a lot. We use it here quite a bit. And I'm going to just throw a little bit of that in there. That's a little bit less than a tablespoon. And then it'll usually call for a fat. So you've got the liquid, you've got the seasoning, and you normally would put either butter or olive oil. This could be omitted if you're trying to reduce the fat. But when we're done here, we'll end up with about 4 cups or so. So we'll end up with a nice distribution of that fat. So there's not a lot in each individual portion. But again, you could probably omit that if that's something you wanted to do. And that only takes a second to come up to a boil. And while it's doing that, I'm going to move on to the bonus recipe, which is, as I was saying earlier, one of my favorites. I've been eating Greek salad. Well, I grew up in Idaho, so we didn't have a lot of this sort of thing back in the day. But I went to school abroad and I studied in France. And after summer, or during the summer, when the semester was over, I traveled and spent a lot of time in Greece. And I probably ate this particular salad every single day. So I just love it. It's so simple. And I made a little healthy twist on it as well. So I've got cucumbers. You'll see it at a lot of restaurants in the US. It usually includes lettuce. I'm not adding lettuce. In Greece, it never has salad mixed in with it. And it has one other ingredient of olives, which I didn't put in tonight just to reduce the sodium. So we're just kind of like a healthy twist on it. Some fresh tomatoes. Again, a little bit of olive oil, a little bit of vinegar. And the vinegar that I have is the one that I showed you last week, when we did pickling, or the week before. It's the tarragon vinegar. Traditionally, it's a red wine vinegar. I've got the oregano. I've got some sliced red onions, some sliced peppers. And then traditionally, it's always feta cheese, but because it's like high sodium and a little bit higher in fat, I'm only going to use a tiny bit of that. And I'm substituting most of it with some firm tofu. So I'll basically just need to mix all these together with a little bit pepper and toss it, let it soak, and we're gonna have a delicious salad. Any other questions at the moment, Jim?
No, not at this point.
Okay, awesome. So I'll just toss these in. The riper the tomato, the better. As we get that juice pulled out from that, it makes, in a sense, part of our dressing as well. So I've got the onions, the tomatoes, the cucumbers, and this is a nice little red pepper I diced up. You could use green peppers as well. It's totally up to you. Here's where I'm adding the tofu, but not the wrapper part. You don't want that. That was the firm tofu wrapper part. And then a little bit of this feta. So, you know, we have the occasional cheat day. We've done a few baking classes and whatnot. So there's certain things that we try to reduce. I mean, obviously we're going to reduce sodium. We'll try to reduce fat, increase our fiber intake and things like that. But the flavor and the profile that you get from this cheese is just impossible to find a substitute for. So the tofu won't give me the flavor, but it'll give me the texture. So I can use just a little bit. I'm going to add about half of this. And there's enough here for probably 6 people. So that's not a whole lot in there when you think about it. And then a little bit of white pepper. You could use cracked black pepper as well if you wanted to. I've got that olive oil and that vinegar. And this is a dressing. We've done some salads and salad dressings before in class here. And this is one of the ones where it's not mixed in advance, it's mixed with the salad. And, you know, that's one of the easier ways to make a dressing. Actually, when I was going to school in France, the house that I lived in and the family that I lived with every night had salad, and she would always mix the bottom of the bowl, mustard and oil and fresh lemon, and then just toss the greens. So it doesn't have to be something that's mixed separately. And I'm going to take a quick look here before we toss that. This should be boiling now, and it is. And what I do here, this is why I love this, it's so simple. I'm going to pour in the couscous. I'm going to turn off the heat. I'm going to stir it around, make sure that it's nice and even.
And Chef Dan, when you're ready, we have a few more questions.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Lori's asking, could you crush up the firm tofu to make it more feta-like?
Yeah, you could. That's a great question. It'll break up a little bit when I had this for lunch today, actually. When I was preparing everything in the kitchen, I made a nice little batch. And as I tossed it, it kind of broke up. You can be gentle. You could be a little bit more firm. It's kind of up to you, but absolutely, you could just crumble it up by hand. You wouldn't even have to cut it. I cut little squares, probably out of habit, but you could easily just break it and it would look more like the standard feta cheese that we come to know in the kitchen. So if you look at that, I'm breaking it up and it looks just like the feta.
And then Corky's mom is asking, is the tofu meant to reduce the amount of feta?
That's correct. Yeah, it gives the impression of the feta cheese. We'll still have some in there for flavor, but it builds up the flour or the salad. Now we got a little bit of protein in there that you would get from the cheese, but without as much fat. So yeah, absolutely. And then I'm just going to dice up the oregano. This is the Mexican one, and you don't need a whole lot. It's about a tablespoon. You could use the whole leaves as well, but I'm just going to chop it up a little bit finer. And every time I have this salad, it makes me, you know, I camped and backpacked through Europe for 3 months, and I loved Greece because it was inexpensive and because of salads like this. I just remember eating it like every day. And you'd always get a nice basket of bread, which I have right here. And it takes you back, you know. So that's the great thing about food, is it can take you back to a different place in time. And we can make it a little healthier, right? When we're older, we want to make sure we bring the memories along, but we maybe take out the fat or the sodium.
Charlene asked, is it better to marinate the salad for a couple of hours before serving, or is it ready to serve right after mixing?
A great question, Carlene. For me, it's best served immediately. But you'll see, and here's a trick I think I've maybe showed you guys before. If you can use a spoon, but because I filled this smaller bowl up pretty full, I'm going to just put another one on top. If you get two bowls that are exactly the same size, then it's almost like a washing machine. Then you can just spin it around, give it a couple tosses, and that doesn't like go all over the place. So if you were to try to toss it with just a single bowl, you might end up with pieces falling around. But I'm holding it a little bit tight and I'm just shaking it up, and that should mix it. Give it a little tap. But you will get the salt and the vinegars will start to pull the juices out of the tomato. So within, as long as you're serving this or eating it, within, an hour or so, you're probably going to be fine. 5, 10, 15 minutes chilled in the cooler would be good. Just toss it again before you serve it. But if you can see here, hopefully a little bit, it's nice and shiny. It's very colorful. This is where you would probably throw in traditionally the olives. I love them. We used them last week. I still have some in the kitchen, but they're pretty salty. So we're just going with a little bit healthier twist on this. And, I don't want to pull out too much juices. If you leave this overnight, the next day, it's almost not, well, it's edible, but it's not the same. It's not as fresh. Everything breaks down. The acids will break down cucumber, the tomato, the onions become limp and all of that. So, try to do this fresh. And if you have leftovers, just mix what you need for the day or for the meal, and then put the rest unmixed in the fridge, and you can mix a new fresh batch the next day.
Carla asks, I
yeah,
prefer white pepper, but what makes the difference between that and the black pepper?
That's a good question. We talked about that a little bit last week. It's a different berry. So it's a little, I don't know that I would say stronger per se. I don't, sometimes more subtle. It makes me sneeze more if I'm working with it for sure. But because it's so fine, I guess you might even say it's, just a little bit more subtle, but you're still going to get the pepperiness from it. So if you prefer white, feel free to do that. There's no problem there. Even in your favorite hot sauce, we always talk about that. If you'd like to add a favorite sriracha or something that's going to give a little kick to it, a little pinch of cayenne, that would be no problem as well. So that's easy enough, and look how beautiful that is. And then we'll come back real quick to the couscous, and go ahead, Jim, if you got another question.
Somebody asked, how long did you say that you soak the chicken in the brine?
For the chicken in that marinade that we did, normally I would say at least an hour, but because of time, like the rest that I have here, I'll let it set for an hour and then I'll bake it. You want to give it enough time to absorb some of that flavor. You could also, because it's thicker, it creates a bit of a glaze on top, and it should be done here momentarily. You could spoon a little bit more on top. And if the marinade that you made, you set aside separately, it can almost be used as a sauce as well. But I would normally marinate almost anything that I use for a minimum of about an hour. So certain fish that's really thin might be less than that, but you're still going to get good flavor from it. And we went straight into the oven.
Linda asked, will balsamic or apple cider vinegar work in this recipe?
Oh, I love balsamic, Linda.
I do too.
Yes, it will. The only thing that I would say, if you're doing balsamic, any of your clear apple cider vinegar, distilled white, champagne, even the red malt, anything that's not like dark black, like the Chinese vinegar and balsamic would be great. You could use balsamic on this as well, but it's gonna take on the color. So the tofu or the, in this case, we have both tofu and the cheese, the feta cheese, it'll turn kind of brown and it doesn't look as appealing. But what would be great served with it is that balsamic syrup. And we made that balsamic reductions. I think we've done that maybe 6-7 months ago in one of our earlier classes, and it makes a great drizzle. That would be perfect. So a little bit of bread with this salad and a drizzle of balsamic syrup would be ideal. So if you take a look here, I'll hold this up. It's already, basically we just rehydrated. We brought that liquid to a boil. We added the couscous. We shut it off. We covered it 5 minutes and it's done. You just come back. Usually, you know, you can use a whisk, but it'll usually recommend you use a fork, and you're just sort of breaking it up. It's sort of like minute rice, which, you know, I don't know if a lot of you use that. It's a really convenient product too, but it's just pre-cooked, right? So this is sort of a pre-cooked pasta. We come over here and we can lightly fluff it up. It's absorbed those herbs. It's got all of that flavor from the low fat or the sodium-free stock and their little olive oil and garlic packet. And you can see how it gets nice and light. And this can be served hot or cold. It doesn't have to be a hot item. It can be served cold. That makes a great salad. You could even fold some of this into it cold and make a nice hearty salad if that were the meal itself. So get creative. You probably find all kinds of recipes for couscous online.
Chef Dan, Larry asked, would potassium chloride be a suitable substitute for salt? It does have a slightly different taste, and I'm not sure if it would taste okay in your fresh salad.
That's a great question, Larry. I don't know. Potassium chloride. I hear the word chloride. It's probably the technical term for salt or a salt substitute. But because I don't know, I don't want to say, yeah, go for it. Maybe someone online can look it up, or Alice is over here. I know that they do make salt substitutes or reduced salt substitutes. They usually have MSG and certain things in it. But that's a great question. I don't know the exact answer to that. So I always want to be careful what I tell folks. But I bet someone will look it up before we're done.
Good.
And then I'm just going to put this in a little dish.
Are you using a certain type of tomatoes? Lori is asking.
Yes. Lori, great question. If you, I would say raise your hand if you bought tomatoes lately. But I can't see you, so I wouldn't know. But I bought the cheapest kind, Lori. And believe it or not, it was the local tomato, but it was still, I think, $3.29 a pound. Some of the tomatoes were almost $5 a pound, which is just, to me, crazy. But these look great. They tasted good. They were the local ones. I think it was $3.29, but there was like a $3.29 range. There was all the way up to just short of $5 a pound. So yeah, I mean, whatever's in your budget, or if you're growing your own, you could use cherry tomatoes for this as well. Just cut them in half. But today I basically selected the ones that were on sale.
Good.
It wouldn't be the same with canned though, but this really needs to be a fresh tomato salad.
Luana asked, could fresh basil be used? And somebody else asked, can dried oregano be used? Fresh basil, dried oregano.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's totally up to you. And a lot of those are all Mediterranean herbs. There's even some blends. You could use dried Italian herbs in here, in either one of these actually, or with the chicken. And that's going to give you rosemary, oregano, thyme, parsley, sometimes marjoram. It just depends on the blend, but you get those Mediterranean herbs all blended into one. And that really works for almost universal Mediterranean style herb, as opposed to buying like 6 different individual herbs and creating your own. So yeah, absolutely, that works great. And I'm going to pull this out, Jim. I think it's pretty close. Yeah, and then look, you can see how much that shrunk. So you do get a fair amount of shrinkage when you're cooking chicken. I know it's done, I can just tell. And we've got a lot of beautiful juice actually on the pan. You can see it steaming. So if this is the browning part, or the brown part, which I like, as where we had a little bit more pooled up of the marinade. So I might even put a little bit more on top next time I bake this, so that I have some extra. I think a side of that marinade served with the chicken would be great, but just make sure you're not doing it after you've tossed the chicken in it. So you don't want that raw chicken juice inside the marinade, then you eat it raw. So you just set some aside in a dish and use that as a sauce when you serve it on the side. And then I'm going to save this juice. We don't want to waste that. All of that becomes, we call it liquid gold. in the kitchen. Oh, yeah. It's got that tartness from the lemon juice, the yogurt. Not a lot of sodium. Tasting that, obviously, we didn't use it earlier. Now's when I would come back, hit it with a little bit of my seasoning. And I'm going to pour this juice. So it's just sort of what we call swimming in the sauce. That could be poured into a pan and tightened up. If you're planning a meal and depending on the timing, another great thing about couscous is I could have my chicken come out of the oven and take that juice and pour it into the pot that I'm using for cooking my couscous. So, don't throw that away. That's always something that's really valuable. We like that a lot.
Charlene asked if you can use couscous in wraps.
Yeah, absolutely. You would just need to make sure that it's bound a little bit. So maybe a olive oil based mayonnaise or something on the lighter side like that to bind it, because you can see, or maybe you can see, it's really fluffy and light. So it would tend to fall out if there were nothing there to sort of bind it together. So a little teeny bit of mayo, even some yogurt, some hummus, whatever it is you'd like to kind of give it that binding would be great. And then here, I'm just going to take a little bit of the oregano, and I've already garnished this with some whole ones. I'm going to just pull off some leaves. And if you're doing oregano and thyme, rosemary, and herbs like that, let me get a good one and show you. We did this when we did our herb class. I know Jackie Boland always walks away with like one lesson that she learns that makes it worth her day. And all the time she commits to it. But you strip it down from the top. You don't want to go up. If you go up, it doesn't really work. You want to start at the top, hold the tip, grab it right here, and then you run your hand down this way. And it strips it all off in little pieces. And then you can just sprinkle it around.
Hey, Dan, speaking of lessons learned, do you want to talk about what happens if you over marinate Greek chicken?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was telling Jackie, and it may have been the fact that I used some kiwi in it as well, primarily. But I had marinated some chicken in a yogurt dressing very much like this and added some pureed kiwi. I left it in overnight. And the next day, the chicken flesh was like mush. So the enzymes that were in it just started to go to work with the acids and broke down the tissue in the chicken. I had to throw it away. I couldn't even use it. It was just like baby food. So it had lost its texture completely. So when you do marinades, you do want to be careful. And this one does have a pretty decent level of acidity in it, depending on the yogurt you choose and depending on how juicy your lemon is. But that will go to town on the flesh that you're marinating or the meat product. So I had
the opposite problem. Of course I salted it first, then I put it in the marinade and I left it for 2 days, and it was chicken breast and it was like rubber. It was so tough.
Yeah, and what your lemon probably cooked the chicken. So I'm certain it was, then we talked about this last week. It was the enzymes that are in the kiwi and like pineapple, I'd mentioned this. It has an enzyme that's a tenderizer as well. So you have to be careful marinating things in pineapple fresh. If you buy the canned stuff, it's cooked usually, so it breaks that down and it's not as bad. But a straight fresh pineapple with the juice will tenderize. You'll get it if you're cutting a lot of pineapples. A lot of people feel it on their tongue. If you eat too many pieces of fresh pineapple, your tongue gets a little sensitive. It's because the enzymes are basically breaking down that coating of skin on your tongue or your fingers. Your fingers get really sore. So anyone who's a retired chef from a hotel working in the garde manger department knows exactly what I'm talking about. They'll always wear gloves, because if you're working with cases and cases of pineapple, it just eats away the skin on your fingers. All right, so we've got our nice little loaf of bread here. I can break a couple pieces off. Put it on the side. We've got our yogurt Greek chicken, we got the Greek salad, we got couscous. Super simple, all of these. Anyone could really be a standalone light lunch, but together they make just an amazing dinner. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any other questions that you might have.
Yeah, we have a few. Jerry asked, what temperature was the oven?
Here I put this one at, I recommend 375, but I set this one at 400. The door doesn't close quite all the way, so we lose a little bit of heat. So I usually on this one tend to go a little bit over the recommended one, but anywhere probably between 350 and 400. It would be your safe zone. 375 would probably be perfect. In the recipe, I put that this could also be done on the grill. It could probably also be done, no problem, in a saute pan. In that case, you probably want to remove as much of the yogurt marinade as possible, and then just cook the chicken in the saute pan on the stove. So very versatile. I don't know, you probably microwave it as well, but we don't spend a lot of time teaching microwave cooking.
Okay. Colleen wrote, I noticed that you didn't turn the chicken over in the oven. Do we need to turn it over so it doesn't dry out?
No, absolutely not. It would probably dry out more if you turned it. Normally, let's see what kind of chicken dishes call for turning. A lot of times you might see, I know people that do that with their turkey, or they'll cook their turkey with the breast side down. I think my wife used to do that because and then it protects it because the moisture is going down. But normally if you're baking chicken or baking like any item like this, you do not need to turn it, right? You're looking for that service side, we call it in a restaurant. So you're only going to get one beautiful side. And if you turn it, then that nice, beautiful side that started is now face down in the juice, and it's not going to have any texture to it. So here we can get a little bit of crispness, and we want that, right? We got a little bit of crispness from that little bit of fat, from the glaze that caramelized. We got some color. Same thing if you were doing it in a pan or on a grill. First side that goes down is where you do the primary cooking, and then you flip it to finish it. But the service side is always the nicest side. So you would not want to flip this at all.
And Charlene asked, can you use broil before taking it out to get that char on it?
Yeah, you could. And if it was thin enough, you could probably straight up broil these beginning to end. You just have to be careful. Broil obviously is heat from above, very high, usually 500, maybe a little more, depending on your oven. And if it's thin enough and to cook it thoroughly without burning the top, then that would work fine too. So your oven better than me. If you were doing broil, you could even lower it to the second shelf down. It probably would work. Traditionally, broiling is done on the top shelf, and it's super hot, and it's designed to get that crust or that caramelization taking place. So yeah, you can. You just need to be really careful not to burn your chicken.
Corky's mom asked, does brining a chicken affect how you would marinate it?
Yeah, well, brining to me is essential regardless. So you could still marinate it. We're not marinating this long enough for osmosis to take place to where it absorbs a lot of the liquid that it's marinated in. Plus it's a little thicker, right? So the whole point of a brine is to, if you do it overnight, like with the turkey or with chicken breasts, it will permeate the entire piece of meat, right? Almost all of the pork you're buying in the store now, at least the loins and tenderloins, you'll look on the package, it'll say up to 20% water added. So basically what they're doing is injecting or brining the meat with a sodium mixture, right? It's a salt brine. And that increases the weight of that pork loin or that pork tenderloin or whatever the product is by 20%. And it makes it juicy, it makes it flavorful, people like it, but you're paying for water. So check the package when you, it's not a bad thing, it's actually a good thing, it saves you the trouble, but just keep in mind that you're paying that little premium for a brined product already. You don't see it as much with chicken, but some of the chicken products out there might have that as well.
And if you were using an air fryer, would you remove some of the yogurt? And then what temperature and how long would you use the air fryer?
I'd probably go the same temp. I don't use an air fryer a lot. although I'm going to be, because I think we have something coming up with an air fryer, karaage. Next month is when we start our Japanese series, starting next week. So we're doing 4 classes in a row, one of which is air fried karaage. So we're trying a healthy version. But normally I would say you're maybe, just to be safe, you're going to that 350, 375. The one thing I would reiterate that's really important that you may have picked up on over the course of this last year is that so much of it depends on like the size of your chicken. If you have a really thick chicken breast, you would never broil it. It wouldn't work because it's too thick, it's too hot. So by the time you get the heat going through and cooking the chicken thoroughly, it's going to be burnt on the outside. But you could take that thick one and cut it on a bias or pound it out so that it's thinner, and then you could broil